Today's video is going to be a Ghosts of the Deep dungeon guide for new and returning players. With RiteOfTheNine just round the corner, I personally needed a refresher on this dungeon because I couldn't remember a thing about it. I can't even remember the last time I voluntarily decided to do this dungeon, and I figured if I can't remember, why not make my own guide on the dungeon and relearn it from scratch. Also, as a little challenge to myself and to ensure I make a good guide, I'll make my non-gamer wife watch the guide when it's done and then force her to complete the dungeon for her first time, with no additional guides or help. Sorry, Dado. So you can all look forward to that mess of a dungeon when I finally get around to recording it. Really quickly, before I get any further into the video though, I do want to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who has showed some support in the previous video. I'm glad you found it useful, and I'm having so much fun watching my channel grow thanks to all of you. So if you enjoyed this video or you find it useful, please leave a like, and if you've enjoyed some of my other videos, please consider subscribing too. As always, I'll add timestamps to help navigate the video a bit quicker, so jump to whatever section you want or just sit back with some popcorn. The way I like to break down encounters is give a short version and then a long version. I'll also leave links to the raid secrets post by Prione or Pariane, I think that's how you pronounce it, that has made maps for each encounter. They're absolutely fantastic, and my entire clan has been using his maps for ages. The mechanic or theme of the dungeon is essentially an elaborate game of match the hive symbol. This theme plays a role in each of the encounters, as you will see, so just keep that theme in the back of your mind. The first encounter starts right off the bat. There's no traversing the dungeon. You load in, travel a little bit via Sparrow until you reach a fountain. The TLDR of this entire encounter is kill stuff, follow the path, kill more stuff, remember the symbol, find the symbol at the fountain, deposit your symbol, and just repeat it again 4 times in total. In more detail though, when you start the encounter, you'll need to hang around the fountain for a little bit until you see an ogre spawn. When this ogre is killed, it will drop a green stink trail on the ground, which you can use to track where the next set of enemies will spawn. If you look at it from roughly where the fountain is, it will indicate the direction you need to follow to find your hive symbol. If you're going the correct way, you should see a hive symbol in the sky. As you get closer, some wizards and acolytes will spawn. Kill them to reveal the next green stink trail, which will lead to the same symbol and more enemies. Repeat this process of following the green stink trail until you find another set of enemies. This time, there will be a hive guardian. When you kill it, don't forget to finish the ghost, and then look up into the sky and take note of the hive symbol that you see. It's the same symbol that you've been following this whole time. If you're the one to finish the ghost, you will receive a buff called Vestige of Light, which has a timer. If you don't deposit your blessing at the fountain before the timer expires, it will kill you, so you'll have to move your ass a little bit here. Heading back to the fountain, you should see a mini-boss wizard named Veil Weaver Wizard. When you kill it, it will drop a deep sight orb on the ground. Walk up to it and hold your interact button to reveal. When you reveal, what this does is the 6 statues around the fountain will have different hive symbols. You need to find the statue with the hive symbol that matches the one I told you to remember just a moment ago. Walk up to the statue and hold your interact button again to imbue or deposit your Vestige of Light. Once you deposit your buff, that's pretty much it. You will have completed a quarter of the encounter, and you just need to repeat the entire flow again, starting at killing the ogre. It's a nice introduction into the dungeon's mechanic, where it teaches you about matching the hive symbols. For some extra tips, at this point, it's probably worthwhile to figure out what your fire team is going to call each of the hive symbols, as it might save you some pain later in the dungeon. For example, among my group, we call this one turret or tank, just because it looks like a tank. Another thing you can do is bring up the useful encounter map. I'll leave the link in the description that shows all the possible paths for you to follow, in case you're like me and you get lost. Now let's talk loadouts. Since there isn't any DPS here, any build should suffice. Strong ad clear is important, so weapons and builds that do this well are going to be a good option, such as Trinity Ghoul, Sunshot, Graviton Lance, Area Denial GLs, Lightning Surge melees, Consecration builds. You get the idea. You will have to tango with a few Hive Guardians, so having hard-hitting supers or builds that can deal with them quickly is always useful. Once you've finished up the first encounter and grabbed your loot, it's time for the long traversal. The next section is a bit nightmarish for some people, and I'll be honest, it takes ages because of the underwater parts. I'll do a fast forwarded version of the path through this section, so just follow along as I mention the mechanics and any worthwhile bits that I think you might want to know about. The only mechanic that I think you should really have an understanding of is the air bubbles and your oxygen tank. The air bubbles themselves are present mainly in the second encounter for its own underwater section. The way that they work is when you pick them up, it completely refills your oxygen tank, which you can see in the bottom left corner of your screen. When you pick up the air bubble, it disappears, and it will respawn in about 30 seconds for you to pick it up again. You will need to grab some of the air bubbles throughout the underwater section to refresh your oxygen tank, as you're unable to make it from point to point on a single tank. Bear in mind that each bubble is actually team-based. So if you grab one that another one of your teammates was aiming for, you might just have doomed them. There is a secret chest that you might miss if you don't know where it is. You just have to make a jump slightly more to the left than you did if you went down to the right. I think it's important to understand how the oxygen tank works, because when you are underwater in Encounter 2 and you take some damage from the boss that's in the water with you, your oxygen tank will drain every time he hits you. So you're going to have to pick up bubbles throughout the encounter if you take damage so that you can refresh your oxygen tank to survive. It's not an instant death when your oxygen tank runs out. You will take constant tick damage to the overshield that you're given whenever you enter the water, and only when your overshield runs out will the game kill you. So you will have a little bit of time to move towards an air bubble if your oxygen tank completely drains. When you come to the room that has a bunch of exits to choose from, you have to be very careful which one you go down, as most of them will lead to a pitfall and kill you. The one that you want to jump down is this one here. However, be careful when you slide down not to go immediately out. Try to slow your momentum by either activating your glide or jumping on a hunter just to slow you down, as even though this is the correct hole, it's still possible to be bumped out into the wrong direction. Now that we're at Encounter 2, we get to put the matching symbols mechanic from the first encounter and the janky underwater mechanic from the Traversal together, except this time you have to run away from an angry hive guardian while underwater with your pants down. The short version of this encounter is kill stuff, match the symbols, kill wizards and deposit buffs, DPS. I've got to say though that the short version doesn't really do the mechanics justice. To start with, you'll need to do some ad clear. There are a ton of acolytes, but more importantly, there are 3 big boy knights, and when you kill the 3 of them, you'll spawn a thick ogre at the very top. Kill him and then it's mechanic time. This is going to be when you want to split your team up, with one person diving underwater and 2 people above water doing some heavy crowd control. If one person is fine doing the crowd control, then multiple people underwater doesn't really hurt your team. This is just how my team does it usually. Have one player run back to where the rally flag was to find a deep sight orb. Activating this will reveal 3 hive symbols. The goal here is to find the matching hive symbols underwater and activate them. You can activate them all in one dive or one at a time. The choice is yours, whatever works best for you and your team. The important thing to know if you're heading underwater is that you're going to be chased by the boss the entire time, and he can damage you like I said earlier. He will drain oxygen from your tank each time he hits you, so just keep the position of the air bubbles in the back of your mind in case he does get a lucky hit on you and you need to refill your tank. What I like to do when I see the 3 symbols I need is I look at the encounter map and try to create a path from the drop point to each symbol and then the exit before diving underwater. This lets me plan my path and know where my symbols are without the pressure of the boss and the oxygen levels. Just remember, you can always jump out of the water and figure out your next attempt whenever you want. You don't have to stay underwater and figure it all out. Now, each time you activate the correct symbol, you will spawn a hive guardian wizard above water, which the ad clear team will have to deal with. If you activate the incorrect symbol, it does kill you instantly, hence why I like to plan my path before jumping into the water. Just like the first encounter, when you finish the ghost of a hive guardian, you will gain the buff Vestige of Light, which you will need to deposit in a statue. There are 3 statues around the arena, one on the left, one on the right, and then one at the very top. You will have to deposit a buff at each one of the statues, so that means 1 wizard per 1 statue. Bear in mind that when you deposit the 3rd buff into the 3rd statue, that will start DPS, so make sure you and your team are ready to go before doing this. After depositing the buff, head back to the rally flag for damage. To get started on actually damaging the boss, you'll have to deal with his small overshield before you can actually deal any damage to him. And the only way to break the overshield is by getting a temporary buff called Piercing Light. You can get this buff by killing the mini-boss knight that just spawned on top of the rally flag. This is your priority. When you kill the knight, it will drop a green pool on the ground. Standing in this is the only way to deal damage to the boss's overshield and then allow you to do DPS. You will see a smaller white bar underneath the actual health bar of the encounter boss. This is the overshield you have to break. Once the overshield is gone though, you can DPS from anywhere in the room, so don't worry if you get knocked away from the green pool once it's gone. But I'm sure most teams are going to drop a wall of Radiance here, so you probably won't be moving very far from this spot anyway. General tips for DPS are always a well of Radiance and a debuff. The usual options of Tractor Cannon, Divinity, or Tether always work. Just choose whatever is best for you and your team. When DPS ends, rinse and repeat all the steps from the beginning until you finally kill the boss, and most importantly, finish the damn ghost! Now let's talk loadouts. Keeping it simple, I'm suggesting a Well of Radiance with Div and Cenotaph. This will be good when not swap is active because Cenotaph will make heavy ammo for people who do DPS, and you'll wear Cenotaph with Div for DPS anyway. The two players on DPS should use Microcosm with the artifact perk Harsh Refraction. This is going to give you a 20% buff because Div applies Weaken. But if Lord of Wolves has not been disabled, then use that instead and shred the boss. But let's be honest, it's gonna be disabled. The two players on DPS can be any class that they want. I would recommend two Titans because Storm's Keep is absolutely insane this season, but if you have a Hunter, then Tether is always nice for the 30% debuff, or Golden Gun is always nice, and a Warlock with Nova Bomb could never go wrong either. There's two main reasons why I'm making these suggestions. First, considering not swap will be active when Rite-of-the-Nine comes out, you can't switch your exotic as painlessly as players have become accustomed to. So why not just stick with things that have a use before DPS and during DPS? Cenotaph will ensure that players on DPS will have an abundance of heavy ammo thanks to the wizards and other mini bosses. The second reason is this loadout is capable of one phasing under regular conditions, and my general rule of thumb is if the loadout can one phase, then it should easily three phase under contest mode. Once you've finished up the third encounter, there is a little bit more of a walk to go until you reach the final boss, but thankfully it's not as long as the previous Traversal. There's a couple of mini bosses and some cursed thralls, but really nothing too threatening. The moths are honestly the most dangerous thing. There is a big open section with a few knights and wizards that deal some hefty damage, and the worst part is they can spawn behind you after you've killed them, so just keep moving and don't linger in one place for too long. There is a secret chest at the top of the final building, just before the final boss, so jump up there for another piece of extra loot if you want. Finally, we've landed at the third and final encounter for this dungeon, and I'll be honest, this one is a bit of a long one. For a quick and dirty explanation, I'll say kill the special knight, collect symbols, deposit the symbols, and DPS. Honestly, I wish the encounter went as fast as explaining the short version, but spoilers, it doesn't. This is the encounter map for this room. You'll see on the map that certain locations are named: the heart, right knee, left foot, right hand and left hand, skull. When I'm explaining things, I will be using the names on this map, so if your team has different callouts, just keep that in mind. I will also preface that there is so much incoming damage in this big open space that having healing options and having invisibility options are going to be super helpful and could save your run. The first thing I recommend doing when the encounter starts is prioritizing the hive knights that spawn. These knights deal a lot of damage with some uncanny precision, and they cause unnecessary problems, so just get rid of them to make your life easier. Now, the first mechanic you have to deal with is identifying the 3 deposit locations. Not every spot on Oryx is used each round, only 3 of the 6 are selected each phase. And to know which ones are important, you need to find and activate the Deep Sight node. Activating Deep Sight will reveal 3 locations with a triangle. What you need to do is pick one of the locations and kill an angry hive knight called Vorlog while you are standing in a ring at this location. You can tell when you're in a good spot because the ground at your feet will glow. As soon as you kill Vorlog, you should run, because the boss will A, teleport right on top of you, and B, spawn happy fun time moths to ruin your day. So create some space and remove the threats one by one. You will notice when the boss teleports, it leaves behind a green circle floating in the air. This circle will always be where the boss teleported from. In this clip, she teleported from the heart to the right knee. You need to physically line up the circle with the Savathûn symbol inside of it in order to progress the mechanic. It needs to be a straight line through the circle, and you will know if you've done this correctly because when you stand in the correct spot, they both disappear. You have to repeat this for all 3 important locations until you have completed the triangle. Kill the knight, stay safe, line up the circle, and repeat. When you've completed the triangle, you should see hive symbols above each spot. This is why it's important to have names for each of the hive symbols, because now you have to go and find each of these symbols and match them up. For this section, you can either stick together as a fire team or split up. Staying safe is the most important thing, so do whatever works for you and your fire team. There is no timer on the encounter, and playing it smart is the best option. The next step is to head into each of the 3 side rooms, go through the water and out the other side into one of the sub areas. In each room, you will find one of the hive symbols and a hive guardian. It's really important to remember which hive symbol is in your room, because when you defeat the hive guardian and finish the ghost, it will disappear and you can't confirm it later. So always double check yourself before moving forward. After finishing the ghost, you can head back to the main room to deposit your buff. But to do this, you have to activate the deep sight node. If you walk up to your symbol before activating deep sight, the game won't let you deposit the buff. Now be careful activating deep sight, as the boss has a habit of targeting you when you don't want her to, and if you die, you will lose your Vestige of Light buff. So the safest play is getting one of your teammates who doesn't have the buff to activate deep sight for you in case they die. Just remember, it is a sacrifice I am willing to make. When deep sight is active, run over to your matching hive symbol and deposit your Vestige of Light. You can deposit the hive symbols in any order you want, however, just like the second encounter, the last buff you deposit will immediately start DPS, so make sure your whole team is ready to go before you do this. Now, just like the second encounter, the boss has a small overshield. You need to break this first by standing in the green circle and getting the piercing light buff. So don't pop your Thunder Crash and fly at the boss. Just wait till the overshield is gone and then fly at the boss. When you manage to beat the boss, don't forget to finish the ghost. I cannot stress that enough. If you don't manage to beat the boss this phase, then just repeat the mechanics again until you're able to clear it, and remember to play it safe. My loadout recommendation is the exact same for the final boss as the previous encounter. Microcosm and Div for the win. The final boss got absolutely shredded when we pulled up and started blasting. The big open space makes sightlines on the boss perfect for a trace rifle bonanza. And that's pretty much it for the refresher of Ghosts of the Deep. With RiteOfTheNine just around the corner, I really hope this guide reminded you of some of the mechanics you may have forgotten, or made some of the mechanics a little clearer for you if you've been attempting this recently. In either case, I hope RNG blesses you and you have a great day.